Happy Fleet's Wake champions! Welcome to the weekly Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms live stream. My name is Dylan, and you may already have noticed that we're doing something a little bit different today, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I would like to thank Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons for hosting us on the official D&D Twitch. We are very stoked to be able to kick off the amazing Thursday lineup each week, and I believe that today it's going to be Tales from Candlekeep coming on after us, followed by Waffle Talk at 4, Trapped in a Birdcage at 5, and The Critical Role at 7 o'clock Pacific. So there really is no need to ever change the channel. Now, to my screen left, my right, in a weird way, you will see none other than Scott Fitzgerald Gray. Keen eyes may recognize him from his name from the masthead of the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons core TRPG books, including the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide, as well as Tales from the Yawning Portal, which features an adventure designed by Scott called Dead and Thay. Scott is also the author of The Hidden Halls of Hazakor. Keep wanting to say Hazakor, an adventure for beginning game masters and first level characters. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here.
So yeah, where do we begin? I think context is usually probably one of the best places to start. So maybe you could fill us in on where your journey with Dungeons and Dragons began.
Personally, I started gaming in high school, which was quite a long time ago. I started playing with AD&D First Edition. Professionally, I started freelancing for Wizards of the Coast doing RPG stuff in about 2004, and I've been working for them pretty steadily ever since.
So that would be, was that 3.5 or 4?
That was 3.5. Worked on a lot of 3.5 stuff, yeah. I was involved in the fourth, little bit in the 4th edition transition. Didn't work on the core books, but worked on a lot of stuff sort of at for the launch of 4E. Cool. Worked on a lot of stuff through the D&D Next playtest. Did a lot of conversion stuff from 4th edition. Did a lot of the stuff that was going out on the website. And then I've been started the first 5th edition stuff I did. I got to work on I got to edit the monster manual. Edited about half of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I was part of the editorial team. I did proofreading for the Player's Handbook, and also worked on the starter set a little bit as well.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, well, probably a month ago now, we had Rudy Rutenberg on as a guest, and if you don't know who Rudy is, he's one of the the duo that is Maze Arcana, and he was talking about how difficult it was for them to put Xanathar's Lost Notes to everything else together for DM's Guild,
right?
And the amount of work that went into it, and just like, you know, learning a new appreciation for the amount of editing work that goes into these books.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of time does it take to get through one of these when it comes to something like editing?
It really depends a lot on the book. RPG editing is one of the more time-intensive types of editing I do. I do a lot of different stuff as a freelancer. I do a big chunk of RPG editing. I also do fiction editing for people, editing novels. Do a little bit of straight copy editing. RPG editing is probably definitely the most time-intensive thing that I do, because it's a real mix of all the different things an editor does. It's a technical editing because you're looking at rules, you're thinking about rules language, you're making sure that everything lines up the way that it's supposed to. You're also doing story editing because there is that narrative element to it. You want to make sure that, you know, things are building properly, that things are sort of panning out, and, you know, the things are sort of working the way that the designer wants them to. And then there's just straight copy editing where you want the prose to be clean and you want it to be readable and you want it to be sort of a nice seamless experience. And all of that, as Rudy and anybody else who's been involved in putting a book together, it does take a lot of time. When I worked on the Monster Manual, just as one example, I worked on that pretty much for 2 solid months, just working on the prose part of it. I didn't work on any of the stat block stuff. That was all being done by Chris Sims and other people at WotC. I was just sort of focused on the story text, the flavor language, the fluff, as it were. And that for me was 2 solid months of just like 8-9 hours a day doing nothing else, just working on that.
And now you're a freelancer, so is that 7 days a week as well?
Sometimes, yeah. I try not to, and I'm very fortunate that way. I know that for a lot of I know there are lots of freelancers who do freelancing on top of their day jobs, and I certainly have done that a lot of times in my life. I'm pretty fortunate right now that I can sort of pick and choose the stuff that I work on, and I can try to focus my work energy on just, like a 9 to 5, 8 to 6 kind of thing, and then still have enough time left over that I can work on my own stuff, because that's the other sort of facet of what I do, in addition to the freelancing.
Cool.
Yeah.
So do you have a favorite personal contribution to any of the 5e books, aside from your adventure in Tales from the Yawning Portal, of course?
The thing that I'm most proud of in the 5e books that I contributed will mean nothing to most people, and I've talked about it before, way back when the books came out, and that's I told people what a firkin was. Here's the context for that. In the old Dungeon Master's Guide, the first 1E AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide had a lot of random dungeon dressing tables in it. You could roll to sort of populate rooms with features, furnishings, that sort of thing. And there was a cool table there of sort of general stuff, random stuff. And on that table was a thing called a firkin, which when I was playing, we had no idea what a firkin was. And I don't even think it was in most of the dictionaries we're using at the time. A firkin is a type of cask or keg. There's a whole bunch of things, like the firkin, the tun, the hogshead, the butt. They're just like different sizes of casks and barrels on that table.
Wow.
And
okay.
So when I was editing that section of the Dungeon Master's Guide, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually tell people how big these things are. So if you look in the book now, it'll tell you that a firkin, and it'll say, that it holds 10 gallons. It'll tell you how big a hogshead is, and tells you what a butt is, and a ton, and all that sort of stuff.
You got a page number on that, Scott?
Give me a second here.
Maybe I can pull it up in the glossary. I'm curious now.
I should have had this up. I wasn't thinking.
DEF. I am so curious if it's... No, it's not that part. This thing is so massive.
Yeah.
Well, I have it here. I'll check. I'm going to check that later, because
I'll find. I've got it up here right now. Just give me a second.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I should have thought about that.
No worries. For those who don't have one of these, you
page
should.
299.
299.
Appendix A, Random Dungeons. A firkin is a small cask holding 10 gallons. So now you know.
Cool.
It's a kind of strange thing. I mean, one of the things about being an editor, and anyone who has worked as an editor will tell you this. It's nothing unique to me. An editor is an interesting job, because if you're doing your job really well, no one notices what you're doing.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, people often say, as an editor, what's the most exciting thing you've done? And it's like, there's no point in my telling you, because you know.
The most exciting thing is I heard nothing about this last thing.
Yeah, that's actually always really good.
Yeah.
You turn stuff over and people are like, yeah, that's fine. You're like, yay. But
it's funny because generally for us, every time we put out a patch for the game that includes new adventures, like there'll be typos in there somewhere. And we're a small enough team that sometimes things could get proof more. And but immediately we get notified by our players where all the typos are. Yeah. All the grammar inconsistencies, all of it. It's like, oh, yep, we know where they are now. Okay, cool. We'll issue a fix today. It's pretty good. Nobody proofs better than thousands and thousands of people reading something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in a general sense, working on 5th edition, working on the core books was extremely cool. And it was also actually unexpected, because I wasn't thinking that I was going to be a part of that until I was actually invited to do it. When we were working on 4th edition, all of the core books were all done in-house. So even though I worked on a lot of early 4th edition stuff, I worked on the first adventures that came out. I wrote one of the first adventures, one of the first 4E adventures that was in dungeon. I had lots of stuff going on, but I didn't get to work on any of the core stuff. I got to see the core books, really early on before they were released, which was pretty cool. So with the 5th edition thing, I was kind of expecting it was going to be the same sort of thing. So I was surprised and delighted when Wizards contacted me and said, we'd like you to edit the monster manual. So that probably that specific moment is probably definitely a highlight.
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, my own contact with wizards is extremely limited, but it's you get a very warm dream come true kind of feeling when they're like, hey, can you, we're going to talk to you about whatever, and you're like, I get to talk to you. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty amazing bunch of people there. I mean, it has been. I mean, it's a bunch of different faces. All the different points that I've been working there. But universally, every person that I've had the opportunity to work with there, it's been an amazing experience.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into some D&D. Are you actively playing in any TRPG games right now?
Yeah, no, I play D&D and I play Pathfinder. I got sort of 2 games going a week. One I play in, one I DM. I've been doing that for quite a while. The game that I DM, I run on Roll20, and it's kind of cool because I'm playing it with a bunch of friends of mine, including some friends that I was gaming with, that I started gaming with in high school.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, 2 of them are in different time zones. There's like a bunch of us in BC. We've got one friend of mine in Toronto, one friend in Montreal, and it's really, really cool that we can get together and do that after all these years.
Yeah, the internet is amazing for that one thing, that like one connective aspect. I mean, it's amazing for a million reasons, but yeah, you can play a game with your friends.
Yeah, and I play my Pathfinder game over like around a table, and that's the ideal. Playing a Roll20 is fun, and it's great to be able to play with people you wouldn't necessarily be able to connect with.
Yeah.
But D&D is just still such a personal experience. That's still the best way to do it.
Yeah, that just that part where you're sitting at the table and like you're able to make eye contact with people, and you get that. I mean, especially if you know the players, you get a vibe for where things are going and the ebb and flow of the game, and like where you can contribute, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very unique experience. I find that, I mean, we work in video games, and it's not something that any RPG-like game can really replicate, that experience of how you are having that experience with people.
Yeah, no, I mean, it gets close, and I mean, like games in general, whether you're talking about RPGs, tabletop, video games, board games, I mean, everything's fun, everything's entertaining. The tabletop RPGs have always had something extra to them, and it's something that it's something you really can't get anywhere else. That's really why I got into them when I got into them in high school, just because it really it addressed a need in myself, for shared storytelling that I honestly didn't know existed before I started gaming. It was something like, it's sort of like you sit down to do something and you think to yourself, I didn't know about this, but at the same time, I didn't know that I've been waiting to do this my whole life. It's just a real monumental kind of feeling that first time you sit down and play.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just think to the lens, got my fiance into playing D&D with myself and some of our other close friends last year, and I mean, she had no interest in it at all before watching some of the streams with me, but she was very nervous about trying it out, and she played, and we patiently walked her through like everything on character creation over the course of 3 hours on that first night, and this is how you do it, and then she started to get excited, and then she the next thing you know, she'd drawn 10 versions of her character before she found one that she liked, so she has the drawing on the back of one of her sheets now. Nice. And now she bugs me for when our next game's going to be, it's because she just totally all in on it all of a sudden. But it was she needed a new gateway, I guess, and just hearing a bunch of us random nerds be like, oh yeah, you should play D&D, and people like but then watching celebrities that she may like for a completely different thing play D&D on a stream, and she's like, oh, maybe I could try that. It's interesting how that world is blowing wide open right now.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, it's we were talking about this a little bit before, but even 10 years ago, it would have been impossible to predict how important streaming's become and how popular it's become. Because it seems D&D seems like a really strange fit for being like a spectator sport, as it were.
Yeah, and it even crazier is things like the Overwatch League. They put up like TSN numbers
Yeah.
on Twitch. You know, like there are probably more people watching esports than conventional sports. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually
It's
true.
all just sports to me, I think, at this point. But
Yeah.
it's that shift it's happening fast.
Yeah, it
Crazy
really is.
fast. Yeah.
I think that kind of I think part of it goes to what we were talking about, the idea that playing D&D is such a personal activity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the one thing that it's hard to understand until you sit down and play. You know, like if you just hear people talk about the game, it's one thing, but actually being immersed in it is something else. And I think the streaming experience, for what it's worth, is it offers a chance for that kind of immersion. It makes you feel like you're actually there, part of it,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and I even expanding on that, I think that there's the intimacy of being a part of that experience is one aspect, but you're also, I mean, the context in which you participate in streaming is also part of it. Like a lot of the time you are in a very comfortable spot in your home. Like you're in your favorite chair with your laptop and a drink and like maybe a tray for your dice, and it's like you are comfortable. And so it's just, it's something different. It's not like going to the bar and watching, I don't know, hockey. Not that I'm against that, because I used to do that a lot, but yeah. So just, I have a whole slew of D&D related ideas and questions here. I'm just kind of thinking, having played since high school, do you have a favorite class to play, or a character that like really stands out for you as like, that was my guy, like, or gal?
I'm pretty old school as far as that goes. I really like the core classes.
Mm-hmm.
I like fighters and I like wizards. If I had to pick two favorites, those would be them. I've tried lots of different things. Pathfinder obviously has a huge range of things you can kind of try out. Lots of cool options.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, for whatever reason, I like sort of your fighter wizard just has a very, very specific, very singular focus on what they do, and I kind of like that. That sort of fits well with the type of role playing I like to do. My first two characters are probably still my favorite ones, and they were naturally a fighter and a wizard.
Yeah.
I've actually thrown them into a little bit of my fiction secretly from time to time.
Oh, really?
Haven't played them in a long, long time, but they're still kind of sort of part of what I'm doing creatively, which is kind of cool.
So speaking of what you're doing creatively, tell me about the Hidden Halls of Hazakor.
Hidden Halls of Hazakor is a little adventure, sort of 64, 72 pages. I'm still finalizing the layout right now, that I just did on Kickstarter. And we were successful, which was pretty cool. It's an adventure for it's a starter adventure, so it's not just for beginning dungeon masters, but I wrote it specifically for young dungeon masters. And it evolved out of the experience of playing with my daughters when they were younger, when we first started playing D&D together. And a couple of years after that, I was running an RPG club at their middle school, which was really cool and a lot of fun. And I wrote the first version of what turned into this adventure, just as something really, really quick that I could just give to people who were starting out, so they'd have something kind of straightforward to follow, like a good classic dungeon crawl type scenario. But also I could throw in lots of little sidebars of advice and explain how to do things. Because as we were playing, as the club was starting up and as people were trying to run games for the first time, I noticed obviously there's a lot of the same questions going around, and a lot of the same uncertainties, and people having a lot of the same problems around the things that all DMs have problems with.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, how to be spontaneous, how to kind of improvise things,
Yeah.
how to bring things back on track when things start to go off the rails, how to kind of have keep a story going, but at the same time not railroad the players. Making sure that everybody's got lots of free choice, everybody's got lots of input into the game, but at the same time, not to get overwhelmed by that. Because when you're first starting out as a DM, that's the thing, in my own experience at least, and in the experience of watching the kids at the RPG club, that's the thing that really is the hardest aspect of it to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. You're juggling so many things at the same time, right? And it's really, really hard to figure out which thing you should focus on, and how to put all the pieces together. Running a game is it's one of those things that you get really good at it the more you do it. But the problem is it doesn't, especially for like a young DM, like if you're an older player, you know, you have a couple of, you know, you try to run your first games. If you don't do a great job, you're kind of like, well, that's okay, you know, I'll get better next time. But for young players, you know, having one or two really bad games can really push them out of the game.
Yep.
And that's something that I think, you know, that's the toughest part, I think, about being a DM at that age, is that it doesn't take very much to discourage you. So this book was basically written just as a means of trying to encourage DMs, you know, to talk about, you know, how to try things, how to do things. And it's been kicking around for a long time. I've been sort of thinking about what I wanted to do with it. I thought more than once about, you know, I might just, you know, do like a polish edit on it and just throw it out as like a free, you know, text only thing that people could kind of, you know, make use of. But the more I thought about that, the more I thought it would be a cool idea to actually put it together as a really nice product, you know, with some really nice illustrations. So I partnered up with, I approached and was overwhelmed that she responded so positively, with an illustrator named Jackie Musto. She's a cartoonist. She does a couple of really cool web comics.
Yeah.
And she's got an amazing style, and it's sort of light, and, you know, had a sort of a great sense of humor in some of it. And there's a lot of humor in the adventure, because that's one thing that I think is that's an easy way for young DMs to kind of, you know, keep the game going, is to kind of, you know, keep it on the funny side sometimes, because that's something else that sort of appeals to young players. You know, that sense of whimsy, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jackie's illustrating the whole thing. The Kickstarter just finished a couple of weeks ago, so she's hard at work on the illustrations. I'm putting the layout together, and it'll be out and available probably in about 3 months.
Okay. And so if somebody missed the Kickstarter, how would they get a copy?
It's going to be available through DriveThruRPG, both as a PDF and as print on demand. So when it's available, I'll be making lots of noise about it, I'm sure.
Okay. So they should just follow you on Twitter or
Twitter or Facebook is the easiest way to kind of keep an eye on me.
Okay.
I've got like a mailing list going. I've had a few people actually contact me saying that they did miss the Kickstarter, so I'm getting a mailing list going, just to, you know, so I can contact people specifically who are interested. So they can, just have a look for me online. Yeah.
What was your Kickstarter experience like?
It was pretty daunting. I mean, it was successful ultimately, and that was good. It was, you know, sort of, you know, got to the point where it funded just like about a week and a half before. So it was, you know, I was pretty confident it was going to fund, because we were getting great response, great feedback. Lots of people really liked it. People especially really loved Jackie's artwork. That was a huge selling point. But at the same time, it wasn't like a you know, blow the doors off success or anything. It was interesting because sort of 3 Kickstarters just, you know, going kind of at the same time. I was running mine. Mike Shea, who's a good friend of mine, Sly Flourish, was doing a book. Was doing a Kickstarter for his new book, Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, which I'm actually editing for him. So I'm working on that. Yeah. You know, so like my Kickstarter was kind of, you know, creeping toward the finish line. Mike's funded in about 5 hours, right? And he's been kind of blown through stretch goals, you know. And then there's like the terrible with names, the fellow who did the Stronghold book.
Oh, Matt Colville.
Yeah, thank you, Matt Colville. You know, who, you know, sort of about the same time that like my Kickstarter and his were like online at about the same time, right? And I'm sort of like creeping towards funding, and he's blasting through $1 million.
I think he hit 2.3 million Canadian last I checked.
Yeah,
it's just like, it's still going. I was like, holy crap!
Yeah. It's just amazing. But I mean, ultimately, you know, my goal with doing the Kickstarter was I wanted to be able to make the book look as good as it possibly could. Yeah, you know, and that meant having Jackie on board, and that meant, you know, you wanted to pay her what she's worth, and it worked out really well. You know, virtually everyone who's seen the project, everyone who's looked at it really likes it. Yeah. But it is something that's for a very small subset of gamers. It's for gamers who have kids and who, you know, want to be involved in their kids playing, basically. You know, so I knew it wasn't going to be like a really big, widely popular piece. But I'm really satisfied with how it turned out.
Cool. Yeah. Do we have an ETA on when we can check that out?
I think we're looking at sort of June and July, I think, for the PDF and for the print version. I expect we might be a little bit earlier than that.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. But sometime this summer, we'll say that is sort of the safe date.
Okay. We have a couple questions in from our
Sure.
audience.
Cool.
One of them was asking about how do they get it now that the Kickstarter is complete, but we covered that. Another one asks when is Nordom going to be in Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms? And then we also have one here. Somebody's curious about how you feel about the second edition of Pathfinder.
Oh, I don't know anything about the second edition of Pathfinder aside from what everybody else knows. You know?
Okay.
I haven't done any work for Paizo.
They were probably hoping you were on the inside track for that one.
I'm not, unfortunately. I think it's, I think it's going to be amazing. Just based strictly on the people that are working on it. I don't work for Paizo, but I know many of the people that are there professionally.
Yeah.
Interact with them online, and I know, over and above that, I know the kind of work that they do. There's absolutely no way that this new version isn't going to be a remarkable game. At the same time, I understand, people who have a lot invested in Pathfinder First Edition who are kind of like, okay, this is a big change, and what does that mean for me, and what does that mean for my game, and for my group and the whole bit. So I think as more information comes out about the game, I think as people get a chance to sort of see what's going on under the hood, as it were, I think the big issue right now is everybody's got questions, and the questions can't be answered because the game isn't in front of us.
Yeah.
So once that happens, I think people will get a better sense of what's going on, and I hope people will be on board with it, because I do think it's going to be pretty cool.
Cool. So, I mean, Pathfinder is a bit of a sidestep from D&D. Like, just thinking about D&D more, as if you need to think about it more often than you already do. What is it like building D&D adventures? I know that you have Dead and Thay in this book.
Yeah.
What's that like, putting that together?
It's really cool. I mean, it's the best job in the world. I'm the luckiest person on the face of the earth. I admit that regularly, in terms of being able to do the sorts of things that I do and work with some of the people that I work with.
Yeah.
Building an adventure is a tricky thing. It's probably the most difficult part of game writing, I think, because much like being a DM in the first place, you're juggling a lot of different stuff. And there are real limits as to what you can or can't do without actually breaking what you're trying to do. Writing adventures is the big challenge of it. Ultimately, is that when you're writing an adventure, you have to keep in mind that it's not a finished piece. Okay, you're only ever writing a framework for other people to take and create their own story with, right? And that's a real challenge, because you want to make it interesting. You want to give people ideas for things they can do. You want to put in cool stuff, right? But you also have to always in the back of your mind have the idea that the stuff you're putting down there, people are going to take it and they're going to turn it into their own thing. Whether that's just a matter of working at the table, something happens that you couldn't have possibly predicted, right? So the DM has to take something in a different direction. Or whether it's something that a lot of DMs do, and more DMs should do, which is you take a published adventure and you may not even play it as written. You may just pull pieces out of it. You may go through it and say, this isn't a great fit for my game, or it isn't a great fit for my group, or it's the wrong level, for where I am in the campaign right now. But this bit, this encounter, this trap, this setup, this bit of narrative is really cool. So I'm going to lift it and I'm going to bring it into my own thing, right? And it's really, really difficult when you're writing to keep all that in mind. That's the big challenge, I think, for me at least, when you're writing adventures.
It's like writing a guide to improvisation, which
exactly,
by
very
its
much
very
so.
nature is somewhat intangible.
Yeah, exactly. I think the best adventure writing, it tells a story when you read the adventure, right? And then when you play the adventure, it tells an unlimited number of different stories, I think that's really the ideal. That's the goal that every adventure writer shoots for. Certainly that's the goal that I shoot for when I'm working on adventures. And I think just sort of, always kind of thinking about the idea that what you're writing down is not fixed points, but possibilities, right? I think if you keep that in mind when you're writing adventures, that will lead you in the right direction, because it'll let you put something together which is cohesive and which is cool, but at the same time isn't just a straight linear narrative from point A to point B. You can see sort of the fixed structure of it, but you can also see the way that structure is going to start to unfold when the DM and the players jump on it and start doing their own thing.
Okay. So I guess, you've already spoken to what the challenges are to putting that together. Like, how does your experience as a player and as a dungeon master, game master, inspire you to do your adventures?
Interesting question. I think sometimes, like if you played something and you found it particularly cool, then that's the sort of thing that you will gravitate towards as a designer, because you want to try to recreate the experience that you had when you did that thing. If there's a certain type of game, if there's a certain type of adventure that you really, really love, then that's something you'll probably come back to time and time again. For me, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I love dungeon crawls. Right? I don't always write dungeon crawls. I do a lot of different sorts of things. Yeah. But as a player, I love dungeon crawls. They were the first adventures I ever played in were In Search of the Unknown and Keep on the Borderlands, like a lot of gamers of my generation, right? And I love them both. I had a great time as a player in them. I had a great time running them. I like, the fact that a dungeon crawl has sort of that self-contained, slightly oppressive quality that I think is really interesting to play with in the game. Right. So yeah, that's something I love. Lots of times when I'm thinking about adventures, I will gravitate towards that, right? Just because it's something that has meant a lot to me as a player. But I think at the same time, like any other type of writing, it shouldn't always just be about recreating what you're already good at or recreating what you already like. It should be about figuring out, what you want to get good at. Figuring out other things that you can use to sort of expand your own sense of creativity and your own sense of who you are as a writer and as a designer and as a dungeon master. Yeah, I think the one thing that always kind of stuck with me when I started getting into RPG stuff was not so much the content itself, the games itself, but the sense of wonder that I felt when I started playing. The sense that I was doing something that was amazing, the sense that I was doing something that I had never done before, and that I could not do any other way other than, sitting down with this character sheet and these weird shaped dice, and actually putting a story together with a group of people, right? So I think that above all else, every time I write something in an adventure, every time I come up with an idea, at the back of my mind, I think I'm always thinking about, is this going to make somebody else feel the way that I felt the first time I started playing? And I hope that has been the case, at least for some of the stuff that I've worked on.
Yeah. It's funny. I was reading a blog rant from a DM recently. Although in retrospect, I'm not sure how recently it was. But they were talking about dungeon crawls specifically, and they were extremely frustrated with the tendency for some creators to just throw a bazillion types of creatures just in a dungeon with no care taken to like how any of them would be there, why any of them would be there, what they're eating, like how do they live there, like how does this make sense, because they needed it to be grounded in something that made sense for them. And like on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, I get that. That's an easy thing to get frustrated about. But at the same time, I'm like, well, sometimes I like being surprised. And if it's, if it's a wizard's menagerie and he like froze everything in place, and when you go into each room, this monster attacks you, you're like, well, that sucks. But at least it makes for some entertaining experiences.
Part of the fun of being an editor is that you sometimes get to be the person who tries to figure out how to make that sort of stuff make sense, which is really cool, because you got something you think, okay, on the face of it, there's some illogic here. So what can we do to make that logical? What can we do, to sort of drop a moment in where the players will go, aha, this thing that seemed really odd actually makes perfect sense now, right? Fourth edition was fun for that, just because fourth edition, with its very, very fixed and very, very focused encounter building, where you could just basically, put together monsters of different challenge ratings and encounter levels, and they would fit together to build a really good encounter pretty quickly.
Yep.
Meant that you very often had adventures coming in where people were sort of throwing together monsters just because of the challenge rating, because it made a really good encounter in terms of the numbers. And then you would have to figure out, okay, this is a great encounter, but why is this bugbear fighting with this gelatinous cube? Right?
Yeah.
And it was fun to come up with ideas to make that sort of thing work. As an editor, that's one thing I really enjoy doing, is sort of just filling in the blanks that can sometimes pop up, when people are sort of focused on the narrative or focused on the rules, and sometimes there's just a little bit of gulf, a little bit of a gap between those two sides of an adventure, and it's fun to be able to fill that in.
We have another couple of questions here
Sure.
from the Twitch streamers.
Yep.
One of them is somebody asking, what was the reception towards the middle school club by parents and teachers who didn't know anything about D&D? Did you have to persuade anyone that this was educational?
Yeah, it was actually pretty good. We had two interesting things happen. First one that happened, my wife's a teacher at the middle school, and it was actually, she sort of set this in motion because she, at one point, she had some students of hers who she saw playing D&D in the hallway one day at lunch. And she was like, she knew D&D because we were playing. She plays at home with me and our daughters at that time. Mm-hmm. And she said, hey, why don't you guys just come and play in my classroom? Because this isn't really a good place, to play. There's people walking up and down and, in your face all day. And so from that, she kind of said, there might be a few other people who are interested. Do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So it kind of grew from there. And we had two things happen that were interesting. One was the vice principal at some point called her in and said, hey, I had a phone call from a parent who said something about D&D and Satanism and demon summoning, and I don't know anything about this game. What can you tell me? And so she came back to me and said, what do I say to him? And I said to her, I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. So I pulled out the stack of documentation, just articles and stuff talking, stuff sort of looking back at the satanic panic of the 80s and all that, and articles from educators and articles from in a few cases, like really good, like from religious people, explaining that this game is not dangerous, that this game is an incredible educational tool. And she gave that stuff to the vice principal, and he's like, I'm good. This is all I need to, just the fact that this stuff exists, that I can look at this, that I can show this to other people, if they have any questions, this is perfect, so that was great.
Especially since I can imagine they'd be dealing with concerned parents, and they're like, no, like, here's, these studies say that this is actually, it's really great for your child.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I mean, hearsay goes a fair distance, and I don't fault anybody who doesn't know the game, for having heard misinformation or for having heard things that isn't true, and not being sure what it's about, right? But the fact that there is so much positive evidence for it, the fact that there's so much literature out there that you can look at and you can talk to people about, and you can show people, I think it takes a very weird mindset to sort of be opposed to the game after you've been exposed to all that. Mm-hmm. Which brings me to the second anecdote, which is we had one young player who actually I was running the group that he was a part of. His parents were very, very devout Christians, and they were concerned about him being in the game. They were kind of like, we're not sure how this really fits with our own faith, mm-hmm. and the whole bit. And they had one stipulation that they came to us and they said, can we ask this? And they talked to him about it, and he was okay with it. And that was that they didn't want him to play a magic user, because that they felt was just a little bit, made them uncomfortable.
Yep.
Right. And we said it's not a problem at all. So he played for 3 years, all the times at the middle school, playing fighters and playing rogues and just that, and they were fine with that. And that to me was really pretty awesome, because it really showed the extent to which, even if you have some reservations, and I don't necessarily agree with those reservations, even though I understand them, you can still have an open mind. And it was a great thing, I think it was a great thing for their son to be able to see that and to be able to play and to find that middle ground, I guess. Mm-hmm. between their concern and between him, having a really good time.
Is that something that you've encountered a lot, or was it one of those things where like the principal came to you, or the vice principal came to you one time, and you're like, "Here's the info," and then that was done?
It was done. It was really just a one-time thing. That was really the only time it ever came up. I had, like, when I was gaming, this was back in the 80s, so sort of right at the heart of that whole initial bout of anti-D&D hysteria. I got a sort of a peripheral sense of it. Like, I was like, my parents were sort of like, hey, we've heard this stuff and we have absolutely no idea what's in this game, and we really don't want to find out about it. So maybe you shouldn't play. And I was thankfully of an age and of a mindset where I just said, yeah, that's not going to happen, and I just kept playing. I had a couple other people in my family. I had an aunt who I loved very much, and she just was really down on it. So it was a really difficult thing every time I was out gaming, and she knew I was out gaming. It was just disapproval.
Yeah.
But I certainly didn't have it as bad as a lot of people had it. I mean, you can talk to any gamers of my generation, or even the generation after that, who talk about their books being burned, their parents taking their gaming stuff, absolutely forbidding them from doing it.
Book burning.
I want to say I'm glad we're past that, but maybe I can just say I hope we're past that. I certainly don't think it's as big an issue now as it used to be.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things, like talking about streaming again, as D&D becomes more mainstream, as it becomes more something that hey, this is something that all kinds of people do, as opposed to just this is something that those guys who hang out in the library after school do.
Yeah.
I think that's all a good thing. I think anything that makes D&D, even people who have no interest in playing, anything that helps to make them understand what the game is, and understand that at its heart, it's you and a bunch of your friends sitting around having a good time. That's a positive thing.
Yeah. One of our audience members is asking where they can get a copy of the evidence you provided to the vice principal.
Most of it I just pulled from offline, and this was a few years ago, so I'm sure it's all changed there. One really good place to start, the writer named, I hope I'm doing this right, Michael Stackpole, I think, did a bunch of stuff back in the day. He really sort of took point against some of the organizations that were actively fighting D&D and were actively spreading misinformation. So you can find some of his stuff online. It's a really good place to start, and it will lead you to other places.
Okay.
Where you can find the same sort of stuff. A lot of that, just very is dated right now because it's talking about sort of the situation of the 80s. There's a lot more recent stuff. One of the things that's a really good thing to look at, especially if you're in a position where you want to game, or somebody wants to game, and there is that religious issue. Who feel uncomfortable with it because of their faith. There are a lot of articles that are actually written by religious people, written by pastors, written by youth group leaders, talking about why they game and why they think other people should game, and why it's not something to worry about. So if that's a specific issue that people have problems with, that's probably where I would start, because that's people speaking from a position of experience which is close to, hopefully, the experience of the people who are concerned about the game. And I think it's having somebody that you implicitly trust talking to you about something is, I think, much more effective than having somebody who's really kind of at arm's length.
Fair. So we have a game related question for you, actually.
Cool.
Somebody's wanting to know what would you make if you were to add a character to Idle Champions?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question. You know what? I don't think that's a question I can answer right now, just because just having gotten into working on the game, I'm still very much kind of feeling my way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a question that I'm going to look forward to answering at some point, but I honestly can't answer it right now, just because there's too many possibilities, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
I do think that's the perfect segue, though, to say to everybody that, like, yes, Scott is working on Idle Champions.
It is.
Yeah. We had somebody shout out to the writers for their dialogue, and I believe to date, because I think that I'm not sure which stuff you've written so far.
I don't think any of this, none of the stuff that I've worked on has been on yet.
Yeah, I think it's coming pretty quickly here.
Yeah, any kudos are very much to.
Yeah, that would be going to Justin and Jacob Burgess, who added a lot of humor to the game that wasn't already there. It's become much more dialogue heavy as it grows. It was a little more brevity before, and now it's. Yeah. That's totally cool though. We get a lot of positive feedback about it. So.
I'm glad about that. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to being able to work on it. To do more stuff on it. It's a really kind of an interesting kind of setup. I mean, Idle Champions is not obviously what you would consider a narrative game. In the sense
not in the sense. This isn't The Witcher 3.
Yeah, but there's still a story there. And it's a really interesting kind of format that's sort of just the brief narrative points that you're allowed to touch on, that you've got the opportunity to touch on, and just to create some sort of a sense of resonance with the characters for people that are playing. I think it's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to playing around with it.
Cool. Not allowed to spoil anything that's coming out, so I'm just trying to think of is there anything that I could talk about related to upcoming stuff? Not hugely. So yeah, I guess. I guess since you're a professional writer, and you've been doing this successfully for a while now, and you've been invited by Wizards to contribute to some pretty awesome stuff. Yeah. Do you have advice that you would give to any other aspiring writers, other people who want to take on this kind of role?
Yeah. I think the general advice that anybody will give to an aspiring creative person applies, to this scenario, which is just spend as much time as you possibly can doing the thing that you love. I mean, there's this is a few years ago, the thing was floating around, like the 10,000 hour rule. I think was it Malcolm Gladwell? I can't remember. I'm terrible at names.
Yeah, it was Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, there's been a certain amount of rebuffing of that concept and talking about, it's not just enough to spend the time, you actually have to have the passion for it, and that's all true, right? But the more you do something, the better you get at it. That's really what it comes down to, The one specific piece of advice I would give to writers, as opposed to just sort of anybody who's interested in being creative, and this is advice I give because it's something I fail at spectacularly a lot of the time, is you read. It's impossible to be a good writer. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. It's very difficult to be the best writer you can be, the best writer that you want to be, if you're not constantly exposing yourself to other people's stuff. And one of the problems that I experience is I love writing so much that if I get into a time crunch, I would rather write than read. And so I can suddenly realize I've been working on stuff and I'm loving what I'm writing, whether it's gaming stuff or fiction. And I suddenly realize, hey, I haven't cracked a book in like weeks, right? And that's a really, really bad hole to go down, because you really need to expose yourself to other stuff. You need to kind of revitalize your creativity by kind of just soaking up the sense of what other people are doing. So as much as you can, as much as you're trying to focus on writing, as much as you're trying to squeeze as much free time into your writing, or squeeze as much writing into your free time as you possibly can, keep reading. Just literally read everything you can get your hands on, because that's a huge part of sort of building up sort of the essential creative muscles that it takes to be a writer.
Yeah, well, you work out your muscles if you want them to get stronger. So
exactly, yeah.
If you're gonna take a stab at writing, then you should write. Yeah, it's funny. Just even on that note, thinking about the 10,000 hour thing. When we talk to people about working in the video game industry, because we'll be at a convention and we'll have parents coming up like, can my son or my daughter really get a job doing this? And it's like, yes, they can. And believe it or not, unlike many industries, nobody graduates high school with 10,000 hours in law to become a lawyer. But a fair number of kids will graduate high school having played games for over 10,000 hours, and they know games. They understand games. They speak the language of gaming and how things work. And it gives them a huge insight into what they need to actually work in an industry like this.
Yeah, it's an amazing kind of instinctive level foundation, for things like that.
Yeah. Sounds like your mic is doing this weird thing where the sensitivity is spiking up and down, and I'm not quite sure why. It's all right. It happens. Just kind of listen there. I'm like, oh, whoa.
I'll try to project a little more.
It's all good. And then I guess as we get closer to wrapping this up and getting into the video game Q&A, do you have a favorite personal writing project?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them actually. On the RPG side of things, I mean, I've done a lot of really cool stuff. I'm very grateful to have had the chance to work on stuff. But there are two pieces in particular that really meant a lot to me. Those were both during the 4th edition D&D era. Two pieces that I worked on for Wizards of the Coast. I worked on two different versions of the Tomb of Horrors. For 4th edition. One was a hardback super adventure, which I worked on with a designer and writer named Aaron Marmel. He was the lead designer on the project, so I got to work with him, which was great because he's a pretty amazing guy. And I've worked with him on a few different things, and I've always had a really great time. And the second thing that I also worked on was a straight-up adaptation of the original Tomb of Horrors module, the 1st edition AD&D module, to 4th edition. And this one is something that not that many people know about because it was done as an RPGA exclusive. It was something that you got sent to you if you were a member of the RPGA at that time.
Okay.
It's sort of like a few times a year they did like sort of special exclusive things, for the members. So this was like a little soft cover thing. It used the existing art from the original adventure, and I took the existing adventure and just basically, it wasn't even like it was sort of half of a writing design job and half of an editing job. Because my goal in sitting down to do it wasn't to rewrite it. It wasn't to turn it into something else. It was to take the original adventure and to streamline it a bit, to tighten up the writing style a little bit where it needed to be tightened up, just doing regular copy editing sorts of things, and also to make it a really kick-ass 4th edition adventure. And that was a huge amount of fun to work on. It was an amazing experience being able to take something like that, like a classic adventure like that, and transform it into something brand new, and that was pretty cool.
Cool.
The second
I got a note here from David saying that some of the stuff you have written has made it into the game already. One of the Grand Tour adventures has some of your writing in it already, so your writing is in the game.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just like,
that's okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say the second thing that I'm most proud of is a novel that I actually wrote a few years ago called We Can Be Heroes. And I really like that piece because it was a novel about gamers, and it was a novel about kind of my life as a gamer. It's not just a novel about people gaming. It's like a contemporary science fiction piece, and there's stuff going on, but the characters in it are based on myself and the people that I gamed with.
Yeah.
And it was really sort of that. It was an attempt to sort of write a book from the perspective of the person I am, having been a gamer my whole life, and it was a lot of fun to work on. And I think it turned out pretty well, and I know a lot of people liked it, so that was pretty gratifying.
Okay, I got a quick one for you.
Sure.
Who's your favorite writer?
Oh boy.
A relatively quick one, maybe?
Relatively quick one. That changes week to week, like, honestly. The best I can do is sort of like who's my favorite writer right now. And my favorite writer right now, just in terms of stuff that I'm reading, is probably Jack Vance. Just because I'm going back and rereading a lot of his old fantasy stuff. The Green Pearl is, I think, probably the book that I just finished of his. Jack Vance was one of the people who's in, if you don't know the name, he's one of the people who's in the 1st edition Dungeon Master's Guides, Appendix N, which talks about fantasy and science fiction authors who kind of inspired Gary Gygax when he was working on the game. Vancian is an adjective that people apply to old style spell casting, basically anything prior to 4th edition. the idea that you have to memorize a spell, you cast it, and once it's cast, you can no longer remember the spell. You don't have access to it anymore.
Yeah.
That was a device that came out of some of Jack Vance's novels.
Oh, okay.
So if you hate that style of spellcasting,
I did hate that style of spellcasting, but it's nice to know that it came from something that I can hate.
Yeah. So like every time I sit down to read a book, that if I'm really enjoying it, that kind of becomes my favorite. N.K. Jemisin, sorry, that's another one I'll throw out because I was reading her stuff not too long ago. She's pretty amazing. I think most people know who she is now because her stuff is becoming incredibly popular and it's won a lot of awards. But if you haven't heard of her, you should definitely check her out.
Okay. And then for a last question, we got a good one here from Envy Fox. Okay. How do you handle going from one edition to another, like doing a conversion from 3.5 to 4 or 5?
Give you the short answer for that. Really what it's about for me is looking at what's underlying the rules. Talking again, like going way back to the beginning of what we were saying earlier, talking about how you're writing adventures and you're always sort of writing it in terms of thinking about the possibilities of things. You're trying to keep it open as much as you possibly can. I think if you dig down to that level when you're looking at converting something, that makes it relatively easy to do the conversion because you're focused more than on the story or the story possibilities than you are on the rules themselves. Then once you've got the story shaped, once you've figured out ways to sort of translate that, then it gets a little bit easier to figure out, okay, will the rules do what I want them to do? In the case of working on the Tomb of Horrors adaptation, there were some things that were really difficult. One of the things was 4th edition likes huge spaces for combat, lots of wide open rooms, and there weren't a lot of those in the Tomb at some point. So I had to come up with some creative ideas to make that happen. One option is just you can redo the map, but I didn't want to redo the map. So I came up with a couple of other interesting ideas. Well, I think they were interesting anyway, for kind of accomplishing that, for letting the fight go more wide open. Whereas in the original one, it's in a 40 by 40 room and that's it. So.
Yeah, it's actually, and thinking back a few steps to the conversation about dungeon crawls, I can think of times where it's like, this monster is too big to be in this room. How did it get here?
Problem.
Did it grow up in here? It couldn't cost possibly, so. Okay, well, Scott, thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon to join us on stream and answer some questions about your work.
Yeah, no, appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
We're definitely really looking forward to seeing what comes next. I always get this close to saying, look forward to seeing, the thing that'll get me in trouble. So yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we move on to the game Q&A?
Really glad to be on board. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we will make sure to tweet out some stuff related to where people can find Halls of Hazakor and connect with you and such. I see that Lauren has been doing a great job in chat of putting some of that stuff out there so people can find you on Twitter and such. But
great. Appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll definitely make it a little easier.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you so much, Scott, and have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right. Join the stream for the Q&A. So, hello, chat. I know we weren't having the regular intimate conversation right from the get-go, like we often are. But I just wanted to make sure that it was a little bit easier for us to do the Scott interview, and so we started with that instead of doing the Q&A first. This guess was weird, Thantanos. Well, Scott has been contributing in some pretty major ways to D&D. On top of contributing to the 5th edition core rule books as an editor. One of his adventures, Dead and Thay, was in this beauty right here, Tales from the Yawning Portal. So you could actually play one of his adventures. And yeah, he's Scott is one of our new writers. He is, or I guess the new writer. No, he is our new writer. Yes, I said it right that time. He's been around forever. As Kessel Zero points out, he's the real deal. You know, he knows D&D better than we do. So yeah, we're stoked to have him on board. We're really stoked to see how everybody responds to the content that starts coming out. You know, we want to continue to up our game as we go, and Scott is a part of that. There's a raffle starting now that's going to blow up that chat and prevent me from reading everything, but I would like to do some welcomes, you know, to some of the players that I could see that are in there. You know, I could see that Lauren Obo Crazy is there. I know Thantanos is there. I've seen Garwar in chat. You know, it's Kitty Kitty Big Butt. Yeah, the raffle thing has destroyed it. See Midrifty, Mayberry Kid, back at ya, Devoodinator. I imagine Uzow, yeah, Giant Dwarf. A lot of the regulars. Welcome. So yeah, no, we're really excited to have Scott on board. It's cool to be able to connect to other people who have had such a major contribution to Dungeons and Dragons, and to be able to bring them on board with Idle Champions. And we're also we're stoked to be able to, start increasing the amount of narrative in the game, and also take some of the load for the narrative off of Justin or David, just because it can be a lot. The game has only been getting more and more dialogue heavy as we release content, so we're pretty stoked about all of that. I see there's a few questions queued up here that Erica has captured over the course of the stream so far. So let's see, what do we have? Devoodinator question: when will the shiny generation of shiny items from chest opening be fixed? Specifically, the shinies should be determined before slot are determined is the fix I am asking about. So for those who don't know, shiny equipment drops are a 0.1% chance per equipment card. And what Devoodinator is referring to is the order in which chests determine what shows up. And then, because what happens is it picks the item, and then it picks whether or not it's shiny, which, as you get more shinies, will eventually start to reduce your chances of getting more. Now, this is something that Justin talked about on stream in the beginning of February, about how we were looking at making an adjustment there that would change the order in which those things are determined, and make it basically so that there isn't a diminishing returns on when shiny items drop. But we haven't gotten to that yet. I could go on, as I tend to, about how small our team is and how priorities get shuffled around. But just, long story short, just like offline gold generation, the shiny item change it's high on our to-do list. We just haven't gotten to it yet. Next question, back at ya. Is one still able to join RPGA? I don't know. Lisa, can you turn off the UI caching to see if it helps your performance on stream? The bigger thing that influences our performance, and I'm going to shuffle around in my chair in a second because I've been sitting awkwardly this entire time and I'm really uncomfortable. So just ignore me as I shift and sit cross-legged so that I'm a little more comfortable for the rest of the stream. Our setup is not an ideal streaming setup, in that our streaming machine, gaming machine, and our production machine are all one machine with multiple screens. And so because of that setup, what we don't have is a dedicated machine to producing XSplit and exporting the stream out to Twitch. And so what we don't... so this can impact our performance. I see that Lisa was asking about missing DPS numbers, but I'm just going to keep ranting about this thing because I'm already on this tangent and you can't derail me from it. So with the way that this is set up, And this also speaks to a question that somebody was asking during the interview, because I keep looking in different directions. I have two screens, but I have on... Alrighty. It looks like it's all working for me. I don't know when that cut out, because I got a memory issue and then everything went. But it does actually totally relate to the thing that I was just saying about how our setup is not ideal. Because if we had a producing machine, that couldn't happen, because everything, all the game-related broadcast problems would be going to that machine, and then that machine would be capturing that feed and everything else and then putting it out. So, yeah, it wasn't a memory leak. It was, well, I hope it wasn't a memory leak, but that was something. So, yes. Welcome to the Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms weekly live stream. My name is Dylan. There's a raffle going on right now. There is lag. There are issues. I don't know if it's our internet. It might be. And if it continues to be terabad, just let us know. Doomhammer time. This game doesn't actually eat RAM like it used to. Everybody's talking about the memory leak. If you've been paying attention to how the client has taken up resources over the last few updates, we've put in a lot of fixes to dramatically reduce the memory footprint. So I challenge you to look at that and double check how much RAM it's actually using for your machine. This machine, however, is it's limping along. What can I say? So I was just about to answer a question about unlockable alternate character portraits. That's a great idea. I like it. I know that we have some updated portraits for some characters, and so yeah, that could be an interesting. Woodstock 72. Gold find percentage seems to fluctuate wildly between attempts of escort to Waterdeep. Yesterday it was 800%, today it is 200%, and it declines as you progress. This is without any clairvoyance potions. How does this work? Woodstock 72, that sounds like you have some kind of bug or something, because I don't have nearly enough information about what's going on for you to in any way diagnose that, but please submit a ticket and hopefully Dave or Mark or Justin can get to it and help you out. Actually, I don't think Justin will be doing it. He'll be doing something else, but Dave or Mark. Hopefully Dave or Mark can help you. Mr. McCranky. Can there be an FAQ for a breakdown of card rarity, color, and levels? If you're wondering how the rarity works for the game, it has actually been on our Steam store page since release. So you can just load up the Steam store page and just read all, scroll to the bottom. There is an explanation of drop rates. Nile Sustanet. Here's a brand new, never been asked question. Can we ever unlock champions from old events? Yeah, it's that one is something that I can't spoil anything on, that there are plans to address that I don't know exactly how long it'll take to do. So we don't have an ETA on a when. But we are getting to it because yeah, because we're getting to it. It's something that's important to players and it's important to us, and we're just figuring it out because yeah, as you know, there's nothing that sucks more for a lot of players that join us, because we regularly have new players joining, that you know, you miss champions. I mean, if you started today, you've missed Birdsong, you've missed Barrowan, you know, like there's a lot of great characters that you've missed out on. So we're trying to figure it out, or at least figure out a way that works for us and works for the game and the design, and that like something that Justin's happy with. So you know, certainly we will update everybody when that does happen. Baron Stromgard, do you have the combination to the air shield, Dylan? Air shield? I don't know what you're talking about. Bill VR, why do I see a lot of players use 2 DPS characters and not maximize and go for 3 in formations? Well, Bill VR, because technically the best way to maximize your DPS for at least most of the formation shapes is to focus on 1. because you can stack more buffs directed at one player than you can at two. And so, because it eventually, like, you'll always reach a point where the amount of damage that an enemy takes exceeds what you're capable of, but because you can stack more buffs on one character, you can go several orders of magnitude further in DPS, which allows you to go several orders of magnitude further in areas, so you just push further. One DPS is actually the best. Oh, Devoodinator again. What do we got? Will we get a way to buy access to an expired event via gems? I can't really speak to that, but we hear people saying that they want ways to go back to past events. So, it's something that's that we're thinking about. Zasiah, not a question, but thanks to y'all, I tuned into Perception Check last night and was greeted with the most bizarrely interesting D&D stream I've ever seen. They had puppet players, and it was all thanks to your giving them a chess code, so thanks. You're welcome, Zasiah. Zasia. It was something else, wasn't it? Yeah, mind a little blown by just Perception Check in general. It's intense. I think we tweeted out a clip where they were talking about us earlier today, and it was just, Perception Check is, it's something. I have no idea. How do I describe Perception Check? Because it seems like saying D&D with puppets is too simple, because there's just too much cleverness and brilliance and insanity going on as well. It's a joy, isn't it? I'm glad you liked it. I can't take credit for it. That's definitely our marketing director Clive put that together. And in fact, anybody who's wondering how we how we distribute codes out to different D&D shows and streams and podcasts and such, that's all Clive. Clive does all of that. Next question. Letters, numbers, letters. Interested in the lore behind the new event. Why does Celeste dislike Umberlee so much? Are some deities in conflict? They sure are. Without getting too much into it, because I am far from a lore master, Umberlee is one of the gods of fury, and has a somewhat inappropriate name in the D&D lexicon where she is called the Queen Bitch. It's I mean, the gods don't tend to like each other or get along anyways. They're maybe kind of cliquey. And Umberlee rolls with a pretty rough crowd. So yeah, Celeste definitely does not like Umberlee, or many of the other gods, really. I mean, everybody seems to always pick their gods. So, but yeah, the bitch queen, Umberlee. You can look that up. There's a lot of resources online that can better explain who Umberlee is, which will give you a pretty good idea of why Celeste doesn't like her. Yeah, I hope that helps. Letters, number of letters. Scarlett Evans. Why contracts just don't give gold based on highest zone reached in a given run? Thus, you often have to switch to the boss you can't beat yet just to use them and go back, or you lose gold. I think what you're seeing is part of the issue with offline gold gain right now, because contracts are based off of the offline gold gain, not your active playing gold gain. And because offline gold gain is currently only a fraction of your live gold gain, you are seeing a lot less gold than you might be expecting otherwise. So that is something that will change with that update when we get to it. I don't have an ETA on it, but it's it's been high on our priority list for a while now. We were hoping to get it into the Chests and Potions update, and it just didn't make it. Nomad84. Are events usually / always the same duration? Is the total amount of tokens dropped over the course of the event pretty consistent? Is that amount 33,900? Yes, pretty close. The only real variable there is that sometimes, while we always aim for the same number of days for an event to be running, The start time can vary by a few hours, depending on when in the day the patch rolls out. So that can, so yes, 33,900 tokens earned just from over the course of the event is about right, plus or minus a few hundred. Leucothea. On a related note, why does Umberlee give us favor for thwarting her priestess? Well, that's that's actually something I had not thought about. I was about to totally make shit up and talk up my ass for that answer, but it's something that I hadn't really thought about. I guess, yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna look like a jerk and totally make something up there. I hadn't even considered it, Leucothea. I hadn't even really looked. So, yeah, I'm going to pass that one along to the team and maybe get an official answer so that I don't just look like a dipshit. Colette, could you increase the time restriction for chess codes from other sources, please? For those of us not in America, we often miss out. So, Colette, the thing about chess codes is chess codes for other sources like Perception Check and Maze Arcana they aren't intended to be chess codes that every player gets, so that we're giving out, I don't know, 4, 5, 10 gold chests a week. What they are intended to be is a reward for our players who tune into our friends' shows. So they aren't supposed to last, those codes. So, I mean, if you miss them, that's unfortunate, but there are quite a few other sources. You can listen to the Dungeon Drunks podcast. You can watch Perception Check. You can watch Maze Arcana shows. There's quite a few of them that you can get codes from, and we give away quite a few codes a week. So, yeah. Somebody was just saying that, oh my god, he's using Delana. And I am, and I was trying out an elf formation before this, and I still had her sitting there. So, now Hitch is there like he's supposed to be. Yeah. Alright. Next question. Eugene Gadir. Will we get dialogue from more characters? That's something that we have talked about a bit. Certainly, Ashara has only had a limited amount of dialogue, despite at least one quest line being about Ashara. So yes, we will. But at the same time, because players miss characters, there are, still most of our players have not unlocked Dritz. There are quite a few event champions that different players have missed for different times or another, so it makes it a challenge to have, stories where those characters are speaking. So the dialogue tends to be limited to core champions. But yes, we will get dialogue from more characters. Zapan28. Will we ever see a character that buffs or is buffed by clicking? I don't know that we will. Yeah. Eugene Gadir again. Why would a drow-hating gnome join a party with 2 drow? That's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, not all drow are evil. Certainly one of our drow is good and the other one is kind of evil. But Zorbu's hate is just for the greater drow as a whole. So, he could be convinced to join a party with Dritz and would, not have an issue with it. But, if he just saw Dritz wandering in the wilderness, he'd probably take a shot at him. So, yeah, it's just one of those things. Alignments don't play a huge factor into what allows us to construct our groups yet. Let's see. What do we got? Oh, I have an official answer to the Umberlee favor question that Justin has sent along. Umberlee is a fickle goddess, and when one person falls from her favor, another rises. So that's why she's giving us favor. Cool beans. That fits in. All right. Let's see. Devoodnator. Zachnafane when? No comment. No comments on upcoming characters. Ray Cool. Meanwhile, y'all made adventures that specifically required Dritz to be unlocked, and he still doesn't have all that much dialogue. Why is that? Dritz is terse in his delivery of dialogue. You know, I wouldn't describe him as, you know, having the gift of gab. But you're right. You know, he could stand to speak up a little more, at least in some of the adventures following. But you know, he tends to leave the chatting to Bruner, and you know, he would also make Regis probably chatty if he was in a group with him. It'd just be Regis chatting all the way. Stills 101. Make Drizzt viable and I'll unlock him. Otherwise, he'll just eat up epics that I can use for other heroes. If you say so. BNN 1926. Could you reveal this weekend's character bonuses? So I mean, are you wanting to know what the buffs are for a potential upcoming promotion, or which characters? I don't know that I could reveal any of those things unless I get specific permission from Justin. But I can say that our next weekend promo is not the one that people are expecting. Let's see, next. Sam Dark One. Will the game ever get iOS or Android versions? I can't reveal any potential upcoming plans about things like other versions of the game. Letters, numbered letters. Why isn't someone like Calliope talking? She's a bard. That's a very good point, actually. She should be chatting. In fact, you'd think that the members of Force Grey would be extremely chatty with each other. So, yeah, I'll pass that along. Because, yeah, Force Grey, chat more with each other. It's not like you guys haven't been through a lot of stuff together. Maybe now I'll upgrade my characters since I have no idea. They're just kind of sitting here. Should I have a Regis ahead? Yeah, Regis ahead. Bum 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 bum. Vengeance. Key strike. Valor. Humans. Now these characters are a little bit better, and we'll be able to push along without me watching them closely. Melee. All right. But yes, letters, numbers, letters, you're correct. Calliope should be chatting more. We've definitely been leaning on like the core, as in the small group of introductory characters the most. Lord of the Fries. Just reading this. Oh, excuse me. Are there any resources on how to build formations and when to sub the more expensive heroes out? I also haven't seen much on builds, but maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. It might be that you're looking in the wrong place, Lord of Fries. Lord of the Fries. The Discord tends to be the place that I direct people to the most, because it has the most active chat about gameplay-related mechanics and formations and such, which the address is discord.gg/idlechampions. You can also find a link to that on the official Idle Champions subreddit, which is at reddit.com/r/idlechampions. So between those two places and possibly even the Steam forums, you should be able to find a fair amount of information about build formations and what's ideal. I know that there is a player-created FAQ being put together in the resources channel of the official Idle Champions Discord. That's being put together by one of our community leaders, Archimedes on Discord, and I can't remember what Archimedes goes by on other channels, but so there's information there. But there's also a formations channel, so there should be a fair amount of resources for you to thanks PB and Jotter, the Flying Hawaiian. There's a fair amount of resources, so hopefully that helps you out. The Flying Hawaiian. You know, it's funny, I have that nickname that I got from somebody. I don't know if anybody knows Canadian hip-hop artists, but Kiprios was the first person to call me the Flying Hawaiian. When I helped with somebody filming a music video for him, like, I don't know, 7 years ago. Zasiah, I know you answered it on the Reddit Q&A, but any chance of adding Critical Role characters eventually? Really just wanted a chance to nerd about the Mighty Nine. This is a question that relates to. We get a question like this every day, just about. So, you know, like, when will you get characters from Acquisitions Incorporated? When will you get characters from Critical Role? When will you get missing characters from X, Y, and Z? And the long and the short of it is that when adding characters to Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, there's a few factors. So you can kind of divide it into two things. There's the one half where these are the characters that that Wizards of the Coast already owns. Whether it's characters like Dritz and Bruner created by R.A. Salvatore for novels, or Minsk and Boo and Delana created for Baldur's Gate and the IDW comic books. You know, these are characters that Wizards owns, and that, like, for us, when it comes to us wanting to use one of them, we reach out, we say, hey, we're interested in this character. Do you have their character sheet, maybe some reference art or some background information that we can use to build the character in game? And, like, that's the easy way of adding characters to Idle Champions. Now, somewhere in the middle is we have a specific niche that Justin wants to fill, and we build a character for that. And then all the way on the other side is adding characters that are actually owned by other people. So the biggest example of that I can give right now is Archon the Cruel, who is actually not owned by Wizards of the Coast. The other members of Force Grey are, but Archon the Cruel is owned by Joe Manganiello, or Joe Manganiello. And so that involves creating a license use agreement between Wizards of the Coast, us, Codename Entertainment, and Joe Manganiello to get Archon in the game. And in that case, we are extraordinarily lucky that the stars aligned and Joe really wanted it to happen, and it did. But that's something that, like, you know, if we want to add Critical Role characters to the game, it really is a matter of, like, a lot of things have to line up to make that possible. So, like, we'll probably never be able to give an ETA on it, or really get into it much further than that. But, like, it is far more complicated than you might think. PB and Jotter, because Archon is the most popular character in the game. I know you're being sarcastic, but, like, just because Archon hasn't had his time to shine, doesn't mean that he won't. Like, you know. Actually, I'm going to stop there because let's just say that could happen. Build VR. Will we see all subclasses of a class type? For example, Rogue has Thief, Assassin, Trickster, Scout, etc., etc. I'm sure that that's something that will possibly eventually happen. We don't tend to focus our character inclusion on subclasses so much as classes and other types of representation. So, you know, how many male, female, or other characters do we have? How many of each race do we have? You know, how many of each class do we have? And so that's kind of how we look at it. And like, we'd like to aim to keep the game diverse when possible. But subclasses isn't necessarily something that we look at. And then also, like, Dritz. Dritz is a super rogue ranger ninja dude, right? Like, I mean, he's leveled up past 20 many times over and is as legendary as characters get in the Forgotten Realms. We pick a specific version and we roll with it. Certainly there are examples of character sheets of his in official either TSR or Wizards of the Coast D&D books, where he has, you know, he's been a fighter in at least some of them. He's been a ranger in others. He's got a lot of different things. So we tend to focus on what works for a character when possible. Lacknor. What if the late game characters triggered conversation in the second or later go-arounds of the adventure? That's a fantastic idea, but that's also a lot of work. So I'm not saying that that'll never happen, because it probably will, but it's, yeah, that's a creating adventures and dialogue for the full roster of champions is going to be an ongoing thing. And yeah, I mean, can you imagine how much writing it might be, say, 3 years from now, when there are 50 more characters in the game. I don't know. I've been just throwing out a number out there. I'm not saying there's going to be 50 characters in 3 years, but like say there are 50 more characters. Like how complicated do we make the dialogue for any given adventure to include all those different people? So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm definitely not going to get too far down the rabbit hole of what kind of writing we could include. But Luco, yeah, we squid you farewell. Nice. But yeah, it's certainly we could diversify our dialogue more. Colette again. Are we likely to see custom quest dialogue based on active characters in the formation? That is probably very unlikely. You know, that's a this isn't a BioWare RPG where every individual character combination results in different elevator dialogue in Mass Effect. That is so much. But yes, we can definitely add more dialogue and more variety. I hear what you're saying. You know, there are always improvements we could make. Stills 101. A suggestion. Can we have a hotkey to swap between imperial and scientific numbers in the UI? It would make it easier for players to communicate figures depending on which they prefer. A hotkey for the Switch. Okay, I'll pass that along. I know that we've been also asked recently to add engineer notation to the game, and we haven't done that yet, so maybe we can tackle both of those things at once at some point. Scarlett Evans. When healing HP protection upgrades become more useful. I play this from around the weak, could reach 150 on some mats if I focus there, but I see pure damage better and go only for it. So that's something that we hope to address with our forthcoming tanking and healing update. I don't have an ETA for when it's coming, but the idea behind it is to make tanking specs more viable and desired in the formation and healing more relevant to the gameplay. I wish there was more for me to give you on that subject, but the only insight I have on it right now is Justin has described a version of what that could look like to me, but I have no idea if that's the final direction that he's going to take with it. So we're just going to have to wait and see what Justin puts together for that. And then when we do make that tanking and healing update, that will be another one where there is a dev blog that goes up on our website, and then we do a Justin Q&A to articulate and explain that system. So we'll get there. I'm just going to take a moment here to swap my characters around. And Birdsong, yeah, Birdsong. That should be close enough to get that buff. It's Beast in this one, right? Beast is what I should be clicking on for Minsk. Anybody? Bueller? Bueller. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So, what's next? Smith of Dreams asking, what is being done about moderation of in-game chat? Honestly, not much. Most of our moderation time is spent looking at the subreddit, the Discord, the Facebook pages, Twitter, and the Steam forums. So the in-game chat, like I know Erica spends time in it, but we don't do a huge amount to actively moderate it. So I guess my follow-up to you, Smith of Dreams, is like, what are you hoping to have happen, or what isn't happening that you would like to see? Like, what's can you give me a little bit more information there, maybe? Next question. Giant Dwarf. Any chance of journal chapters for past completed events or unrepeatable adventures like the initial tutorials? Okay, so I have actually brought this up with the team before, and I'm going to do it again because I am advocating for a journal overhaul. What I don't know is how long it will actually take to have anything related to it happen. You know, there are quite a few things that are I would describe as a higher priority for the dev team. Not to say that it's not important, but like we're small enough that things get shuffled around. Lacknor, Ferris Bueller is 55 now. You mean Matthew Broderick, right? Because Ferris Bueller's that came out in the 80s. I'm not in my 50s. Good Lord. Garwar, is there no reporting feature in chat? I've literally never opened it. You know what's funny is I don't open chat either because I pay attention to too many chat channels already. So, yeah. Hashtag save Ferris. Yeah, could you imagine if John Hughes was making movies now? How much social media would be in them? Nazen Bear. Can I adjust the speed of the dialogue? English is not my native tongue, so most of the time it's a little too fast. I will make a note. I know that we have a toggle for turning off dialogue during free play, but maybe I can pass that along and then have the team speed it up or slow it down as a toggle as well. Ferris Bueller is timeless. Timeless, I say. Yes, a corpse, it is. Actually, I mean, I was too young to have seen it in the theaters when I was young, but I was really happy when a few years ago here in Victoria, because we do outdoor summer movies in the city, that they did Ferris Bueller's Day Off outdoors. And so, you know, pull up in your car and they have the blow up screen and you're watching it. It was great. God, I love that film. I don't get tired of it. Yeah. Let's see. Maybe I'm just gonna pay more attention to these characters for a moment. What am I doing? Even. Shouldn't Birdsong be my DPS? No, apparently not. Okay. I guess my Birdsong isn't good enough. I'm curious, you know, and maybe some of you could fill me in. Like, have any of you really used Zorbu much yet? I mean, he's deep enough in the roster that unlocking and using him in the event at this point might not be too easy. But I'm curious to how he stacks up. Justin says he kicks ass, but yeah, I'm just curious. I'm looking because he has a dex buff. I'm curious to try him out with a Dritz formation in the Grand Tour, since there should be enough buffs for Dritz to justify it. But yeah, I'm just wondering if anybody. Silisa says Zorbu is bad. 900% buff is weak. 900% before or after items. Because like not every character has the astounding overpoweredness of the friendly buff. Okay. I'm curious to try him out still. Oh, 900% dex buff at cap. Okay, so that's before items. All right. Let's see. Lucid Eats. Will you be offering any freebies for regular players when the game comes out of early access and goes gold? Can't really speak to any plans we might have related to when we do eventually leave early access, except to say that we do plan to leave early access. But yeah, I don't know what we would give regular players, if anything. Yeah. Let's play this here. What else do we have today? Do we have anything else I'm supposed to be covering? Oh, I should actually put in the code, shouldn't I? I should get my chest. Release the Kraken. Okay, so none of you have any idea how stoked I was that that was exactly 16 characters and that I could use it today. I can't even. I shouted it across the CNE office when I figured it out. Yeah. All right. Next questions. What do we got? Ethereal, is there going to be another chance to get characters we have missed while not having to wait for an entire year? Yes, and we hope to have something in place before we start getting back to characters that have been out for a year. I can't give more than that, but yeah, it's like we definitely want to have a way to unlock event champions that have been missed. Mike Hermit. Oh, there it is. Excuse me. Mike Hermit. I can keep leveling up my non-event champs gear, but my event champs gear is getting stale. Any way to get more gear for events? So not currently. So when we do a weekend promotion, and this is currently the only way to get extra gear for event champions. When we do a weekend promotion, sometimes we include event champions in that promotion, in which case you are able to get gear for them as well. But that isn't intended to be the only way for that to happen. It's just the way that we have in the game right now. Very cool. Aside from Release the Kraken, what has been your favorite stream chest code so far? Octogenarian loot, the one for Grama, since she was 80 years old. Yeah, I really like that one because it fit. BNN 1926. What is the percentage of receiving a golden chest from free play events? That is a great question. I have no idea. I'll pass that one along to Justin, because I know it's already a percentage for silver drops off bosses, and then there's another percentage for from free play. Okay, but that's. I'm just getting a note. Justin says it's a 33% chance of getting a golden chest from free play for on an adventure completion. However, I don't believe there's any bad luck protection with it, so you could theoretically just be unlucky and get silver chest after silver chest after silver chest. Contrast that, like I've also had ones where you get gold after gold after gold. Thanatos asking if the new champion is underpowered, will we buff them? If they're categorically underpowered, yes. I imagine that we will. But yeah, I'll leave that to I'll leave the balancing domain to Justin. So yeah, there's no pity timer on whether or not you receive a gold chest from a free play. Maniac 126 posting the "Who's Your Daddiest?" That was a good stream code too. I did like that one, but I don't know. Octogenarian loot just sounded clever. So yeah. Morris Satos, will there be a low quality mode in the future? Opening saved up stacks of contracts lags the game screen, if it not freezes it for a few seconds. Sounds like you might be playing on an older machine, Morris Satos. So I don't know that we have plans for a lower quality mode, but I can at least pass your feedback along. Yeah. Thanatos, I heard his buff is only 1/8 as strong as Hitch. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, Hitch's friendly buff is bonkers good. But yeah, I will leave all the champion balance related things to Justin, because that is 100% his domain that he claims ownership of, and that we all just kind of defer to. What do I got here? Okay. Cool. Wanderer of Thoughts. When the Archon, Makos, and Jarl weekend, I opened the chest and got gear for Archon. I never bought him, and I keep getting gear for him. Never used or anything. Any reason for that? Well, it seems like you were getting gear for him despite not having had. So are you saying you've never unlocked him before and you were getting it? Because I'm not quite. I imagine that's what you're trying to communicate. So you open your chest, and you're, instead of getting gear for one of the two characters that you have, you're getting gear for Archon. Archon is unfortunately fortunately a core champion. So you get gear for base champions out of the weekend chests. It's only the event champions you haven't unlocked that you won't get gear for if you don't own them. So you will get gear for Archon, but you wouldn't get gear for Dadius, for example, if you had not unlocked him. So Lisa, when my baby listens to you, she cries. I don't know why. You look friendly enough. I don't know what to tell you. You know, except that your child is possibly right to fear me. That sounds dark, right? And weird. Yeah. So let's see what else. I mean, we did a Q&A on Tuesday, but it seemed like, you know, people are enjoying the event so far. So I'm glad that people are having a chance to unlock Zorbu, and I am curious to see where his place settles in the meta. Yeah. Wanderer thoughts. I never bought him. Is it him just being in the lineup considered unlocking? Wanderer thought it's because Archon is a core character, so it's because he exists in your row of 1 to 12 characters regardless of whether or not you've unlocked him. So while with gold chests you were able to, if you had never had a weekend chest and you were able to open chests and never get loot from because he'd never been unlocked because you'd never reached that slot, that is not the case with weekend promos. So yeah. Looks like our last raffle is underway, which seems like a really good time to start wrapping this all up. First, I want to thanks everybody for hanging in there as we did a little bit of a different thing today, and through the technical issues that we had that for some reason split up our stream, caused us to stop broadcasting. You know, we're really stoked to have Scott Fitzgerald Gray join the team and have joined the team and be writing for adventures. It's very cool to have somebody who has like a serious Dungeons and Dragons resume contributing to the game. So we're really stoked on that, and I'm also really happy that he took time out of his day to join us on stream. It's really fun to be able to have a Q&A with somebody who has, like, you know, I got like this much D&D knowledge, he's got like this much, you know. I mean, I'm sure Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford are up here, but you know, it's nice to talk to somebody who like really knows D&D and knows a lot about it and has been playing it since it came out. So that's very cool. So huge thanks to Scott Fitzgerald Gray for joining us today. There is a lot going on this Twitch channel today. You know, we are obviously going to be wrapping up the Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms live stream pretty quickly here, but we have a Tales from Candlekeep coming up right after us in about 10 minutes. If you don't already, if you have not voted for Tales from Candlekeep Tomb of Annihilation in the Twitch Prime Indie Amplifier yet, I recommend that you do. We really like them. They're great friends, and they put out a really quality game, and so we hope that they get enough votes to maybe win that one. But please vote for them. After Tales from Candlekeep, we have Waffle Talk at 4, followed by Holly Conrad's new show Trapped in a Birdcage, which is a Planescape game. I think she said something about it being always sunny in Sigil. But anyways, so Holly Conrad's Trapped in a Birdcage is coming up at 5 p.m. Pacific. And of course, after that, the Mighty Nine, the Critical Role, is on at 7 o'clock Pacific. So yeah, it's a full, giant, kick-ass lineup of content related to Dungeons & Dragons and D&D games on the D&D Twitch stream all day on Thursday. So yeah, just maybe just open this Twitch channel and never leave ever. Like just stay here. Welcome. This is the best place to be. Back at you, 0. Yeah, Holly really is the best. Holly's awesome. I don't know if anybody follows Dice Camera Action and or Acquisitions Incorporated and has followed Strix's adventures through those things, but like, yeah, Holly is awesome. Yes, thanks Lauren for linking the official Idle Champions Discord and subreddit. I'm going to start wrapping this up. Yeah, I already said all the things that are coming out. I think thanks to Wizards of the Coast for hosting us. Thanks to Scott again for joining us. My name is Dylan. You have been watching or at least listening to me, at least in part. And yeah, we will be back next week, same time, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific. So yeah. Have a fantastic day, everybody, and thank you so much for watching.